Now, bullying. The Scottish Government's being urged to tackle the reasons behind bullying in the NHS head-on. Dr Lewis Morrison, chairman of doctors' organisation BMA Scotland, says patient care is being affected and the drive to meet targets is doomed to fail unless steps are taken urgently.
I think many large organisations have issues with institutional bullying, and the NHS isn't any different. But what's different about the NHS is that we're meant to be looking after people in the NHS, and it does seem perverse that as an organisation we don't necessarily look after the people who are doing the caring.
It doesn't take rocket science, does it, to think that it's not just this organisation. This seems to happen everywhere human beings gather. But more than 560 allegations of bullying or harassment have been raised across the NHS in Scotland in 5 years. The figures were obtained through an FOI, Freedom of Information request by BMA Scotland. It comes after a review earlier this year suggests there had been hundreds of bullying allegations at NHS Highland, and the Scottish Government, as we heard, says the welfare of staff in the NHS is paramount. And it made us think, what do you do when you know you're being bullied? What can you do about it? How can you spot someone who's being bullied? Why does this happen? How can we change this? And we've got great stories coming in. Please do keep them coming in. 80295 is the text. Let's talk to the founder of the National Bullying Helpline, Christine Pratt, and senior employment lawyer Paul Deans from Thompsons Solicitors. Can we come to you, Christine, first of all?
Yes, good afternoon, John and Paul. Thank you very much for inviting me on your programme. Disturbingly, this is a very serious problem, and your comments earlier were spot on. It is a UK-wide issue, and over 60, sometimes as high as 70 or 80% of work-related calls to our helpline are from NHS employees. So we've given this subject a great deal of thought. And I do have a couple of comments that I would like to make. In terms of the spotting it and the culture, I say there are some common themes which include low resourcing, low funding and high stress levels. And this cocktail is a combination which creates insecurity and fear and divide. So that's where there is, where the culture is developing from. The Care Quality Commissioner has a greater role to play in investigating the levels and statistics, not just in Scotland, might I say, but right across the UK.
Yeah, Christine, I don't want to concentrate on the NHS because I'd rather talk about this as a wider issue because,
sure.
There will be a review into this and we hope they come up with any solution, but I don't want that to be the focus. I want it to be that we think widely about many people are bullied in many situations, and to try to help the audience to give them some tools if they know they're being bullied or they're seeing somebody being bullied, what can they do? So can you help the audience? What are the signs that you're being bullied, or what are the signs that you can see if somebody else is being bullied?
It's about how you're feeling versus how management are responding in a nutshell. I mean, I was on the panel that drafted the ACAS Code of Practice, so I fought hard for the rights of employees. And if an employee is feeling that they are being bullied, they should feel able to come forward, to step forward and report how they concern. And we've seen a lot of this within central government recently, haven't we, where women in particular have felt unable to follow process or to trigger a formal complaint.
This is about then how you feel. So the sign that you're being bullied is if you feel you're being bullied. That's good enough. Just like feel you're being bullied and then do something about it.
It's a combination. So we always encourage callers to keep a diary and to start to gather documentary evidence if they can, and then to escalate it to senior management. Because, a lot of managers, unfortunately, a lot of heads of department, particularly within the NHS, but across industry generally, they don't have line manager skills. They don't have the training necessarily to spot where an employee grievance or a complaint or a concern within a team needs to be investigated or looked at. And there is case law on this. The employer now should not wait for that formal letter of complaint to hit the manager's desk. They should be looking out and spotting, as you say, watching for those signs, where maybe there is high absence or, sickness or high turnover of staff, or teams working in packs and and the tail wagging the dog, so to speak, dictating to management what they will and won't do. Managers team leaders, heads of department need to have the confidence to take action.
Paul.
And the skill, of course.
Of course. Well, Paul, you're the employment lawyer, and Christine's saying, first of all, if you feel you're being bullied, you're being bullied. And then you've got to act on it. And you should keep a diary. And you should, first of all, say something, because you can trigger it whenever. So when you're at work and people come to you with cases and say, I think I'm being bullied, what typically is happening? What do you say to them? And what kinds of things do they say are happening to them?
Thanks, John. Well, it can really range from what I would maybe term low-level bullying, and I use the term advisedly, but it could be someone feeling isolated, like they feel they're being marginalised in the workplace. It could range through to a boss who's perhaps putting extra responsibility and too much work on them. It could be verbal comments. It could be even to the other end of physical or sexual abuse and harassment in the workplace. So it can take a wide range of forms. Certainly in terms of where an individual can go with it, every employee has the right to raise a grievance. That's a statutory right, a right in law. And they can raise a grievance where they put their concerns in writing to their employer, and the employer has a duty to take that forward and investigate.
But Paul, what's the difference then? I guess it's a fine line between someone who is a tough boss, say, and an abusive boss.
That's correct, and to some extent there will be an element of perception. An employer obviously has the right to manage their employees, but the line certainly has to be drawn somewhere. That's where, if an individual can put their grievance into writing, it's something which an independent manager can take away. They can investigate it, they can look at it, and then they can come to a conclusion as to whether that is quite simply robust management or whether it has overstepped that line and actually strayed into bullying behaviour.
How can you tell?
I won't lie, it's not always easy. Each case, obviously, as a lawyer would always say, each case has to be judged on its own facts. There is an element of the perception of the individual, but there's also an element of objectively whether the behaviour aimed towards the individual constituted unacceptable conduct or not.
Christine, you would like to think, wouldn't you, that the world's a wonderful place and people aren't unkind to each other, but people kill each other. That's what happens, and we have territorial batters of all kinds. So if you've got somebody at your work who plainly is being subjected to unfair treatment that borders on bullying, and we're expecting that person to be the person that puts in the complaint, what about all the people who are watching it?
Well, I think there is an expectation in management as well, because a lot of managers lack the leadership skills to know how and when to take action, and to know, importantly, where there is risk to the business. So the signs will include, as John has said, people being excluded, these different ranges of allegations of sexual harassment or discrimination or being marginalised. And the manager, the head of department, the person responsible for managing and leading should be able to identify where there is risk. As I say, high turnover statistics, people leaving the business, cost to the business, unnecessary cost to the business is all a sign, an indicator that the team is not gelling and is not working productively as a team. And that in itself, not to mention the legal risks of litigation, present a risk to the business.
So, Paul, there is a duty of care that employers have. Do they, I'm sure they recognise the duty of care, but do they maybe read the signs properly? I mean, Christine was alluding earlier to training and maybe the lack of training in sort of line management skills that a lot of people have, because it could be belittling behaviour, repeated behaviour, but do they recognise that as bullying?
I think in some cases, undoubtedly they don't, and they're maybe behaving in a way which they don't realise is having this impact. However, but I think that ties into what Christine has alluded to in terms of actually managers in management positions, but who haven't been given any training and who perhaps don't have the skills to actually know how to effectively and fairly manage individuals. So there's certainly a responsibility in terms of what you've referred to as the duty of care for an employer to make sure that individuals know how to manage their staff.
Text coming in. This is a former private in Lochaber. Says bullying was rife and part and parcel of army life and discipline in the early 90s. It's all about balance of power and lack of it. The army's response was to promote perpetrators and in one or two cases award commissions. Let me come to you then, Christine. What kinds of cases have you had? I know you've had quite a few health workers, haven't you, phone up and tell you they've got issues. Give me examples without spelling it out in detail. Give me examples from different businesses too, not just the NHS.
Well, I'm afraid, I could talk to you all afternoon. The cases range significantly, and I know that it's the NHS whistleblowing matter that's triggered this debate, but I am handling a case at the moment, a particularly serious case, where the trust, it is an NHS trust, has known about the sexual harassment for almost 3 years. That is not, sadly, an uncommon case. It doesn't just apply in the NHS. Employers are, well, as I would say, there are none so deaf as those that don't want to hear, and I include the Army and other public sector, NHS and other organisations. If management don't want to investigate a grievance or look into a complaint, they won't. They will try to bury it. Can I
pick up on both of you? This sexual harassment. Are women more often bullied than men then, because of the sexual element and the power element?
No, the case I'm referring to involves a man. So bullying is discrimination, but it doesn't discriminate. It can be either way, and we get a lot of men call us and that's quite important because men are calling our helpline and speaking to us often anonymously in the first instance because they are ashamed of what they are going through and how they are feeling, and they don't feel able to speak out in the workplace.
Christine, can I just ask you, the advice we hear about bullying generally is, if you stand up to a bully, they'll crumble because they're cowardly themselves. Is that true, or is that a bit of a myth?
There is some truth in that, yes. There are all sorts of reasons why an individual bullies or why one child bullies another. And we're going into a psychological arena here. It's very, very complex. A bully may be targeting someone because they perceive them to be a threat, or there may be corporate bullying because the management team are of a culture and a mind where they won't take external expert advice and address the issues or follow their policies and procedures. It can be one-on-one bullying where, there's been an issue or an incident or a spat between the two individuals and one perceives the other to be a threat. But it can be an extraordinarily complex situation, and no two cases are the same, as John alluded to earlier. Each case has to be taken merit by merit.
Well, Christine, I've got you and Paul here, so you can both reply to this text. Your contributor, Christine, says, if you feel you're being bullied, you're being bullied. What utter fiction. You're being bullied when you're treated with a lack of respect, courtesy and decency. Some people think simply being expected to do their job is bullying. It's not. Pandering to snowflakes and letting them believe they're being bullied when they're not only demeans the suffering of those who are suffering from being bullied. Paul?
Well, from a legal perspective, there isn't a definition of what bullying actually is. And that obviously presents a bit of an issue because everyone may perceive it to be very, very different. So what is protected in law is harassment, and perhaps that's a good example in terms of looking at what is prohibited, and that is unwanted conduct, and it's unwanted conduct which would violate an individual's dignity and create an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating or otherwise offensive environment for an individual. So that really is the legal definition we have, and one area where the law frankly doesn't have enough teeth, in my view, is that there is no definition and no specific protection for individuals from bullying.
Christine?
Yes, sorry?
What's your take on someone saying if you make bullying the word that describes everyone being asked to do their job strictly?
And when I said earlier that if an individual feels bullied, then they are being bullied, that isn't strictly speaking true. What I mean, and may I clarify, if a person believes they're being bullied, then there are steps they can take, which include keeping a diary, familiarising themselves with their policies and processes, and talking to someone. What matters then is how the management team respond to that and deal with it. because a minor spat, a minor issue, can be remedied so easily if management will engage and take it seriously, and the person who's feeling momentarily maybe aggrieved can talk it through with someone sensibly who will take them seriously.
Christine, thank you. Christine Pratt and Paul Deans, thank you. So there's no real definition of bullying. If you think you're being bullied, write it down, escalate it, and then you'll find out.